She blinked. Stars. Just stars. A billion diamond shards scattered across an endless black cloth. Not a comforting thought when your head felt like it had been used as a cymbal at a death metal concert. Groaning, she pushed herself up, or at least tried to. Turns out 0G and hangovers were a truly awful combination. Bits of twisted metal floated lazily around her, shimmering in the starlight. Definitely not Kansas anymore. Or Earth, for that matter. Where the heck was she? The remains of a spacecraft, that much was obvious. Wires sparked intermittently and the air tasted like burnt plastic and regret. Judging by the scrapes and bruises blooming across her arms, it hadn't been a smooth landing. Or rather, a smooth anything. She fumbled for anything to get her bearings. A crumpled flight suit, half melted. A data pad, cracked and useless. Her stomach churned. This was not how she envisioned her Tuesday. Okay, she mumbled to the uncaring void. Guess it's time to figure out how screwed I really am. Right, first things first, survival. She needed supplies and fast. Floating through the wreckage, she began to scavenge. Rummaging through storage lockers and dislodged panels, she started to assemble a makeshift survival kit. Protein bars, thankfully not expired, or at least not glowing green, a half-full water canister, and a multi-tool that looked suspiciously like it belonged in a Swiss Army knife museum. Not exactly luxury accommodations, but it was a start. Then she saw it, a sleek metallic device half buried in a pile of debris. It hummed faintly, pulsing with a soft blue light. No idea what it was, but it looked important, or at least expensive. Definitely worth lugging around. Well, hello there, Shiny, she muttered, grabbing the device. It felt cool to the touch, fitting snugly in her palm. Maybe you're my ticket out of this mess. As if summoned by her words, a klaxon blared, cutting through the silence. Red lights flashed, bathing the wreckage in an ominous glow. Oh, great, she sighed. Company. A ship, angular and menacing, materialized out of the darkness. It was, like a giant metallic beetle, all sharp edges and glowing mandibles. Definitely not a rescue party. This was going to be interesting. From the ship, a beam of light shot out, solidifying into a ramp that extended towards the wreckage. Figures emerged, clad in rigid, segmented armor. Their faces were hidden behind mirrored visors, their movements precise and economical. These were the Cathar, a species renowned throughout the galaxy for their unflinching adherence to protocol, their intricate bureaucratic systems, and their complete lack of a sense of humor. And they were marching straight towards her. The lead Cathar, presumably an officer, stopped a few feet away. Its voice, synthesized and devoid of emotion, echoed through the wreckage. You are in violation of Intergalactic Salvage Regulation 37B subsection Gamma. State your designation and purpose. She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Designation? I go by Lucky. And my purpose is trying not to die in this cosmic junkyard. Got a problem with that, Tin Man? The Cathar tilted its head, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both confusion and disapproval. Irrelevant. You are in possession of unauthorized salvage. Surrender the artifact and submit to processing. Artifact, oh right, the shiny thing. She clutched it tighter. Nah, I think I'll hold on to it. Besides, processing sounds unpleasant. She flashed a sarcastic smile. Unless you have coffee. I'm really craving coffee. The Cathar remained impassive. Coffee is an illogical stimulant. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance is inefficient. It raised a weapon, a sleek energy rifle that looked far too lethal for a Tuesday morning. Inefficient, huh? She grinned, a spark of defiance in her eyes. I'll keep that in mind. This was going to be a very long day. The Cathar officer, seemingly unfazed by Lucky's blatant disregard for protocol, maintained its rigid posture. Your levity is unwarranted. The artifact you possess is designated a Class A temporal regulator, vital to the stabilization matrix of Sector Gamma 9. Its misuse could result in catastrophic temporal anomalies. Lucky blinked, unimpressed. A temporal what now? Sounds fancy. But hey, no pressure, right? I'm sure I can figure out how this thingamajig works. She turned the device over in her hands, examining its glowing glyphs. So, any instructions, or is it just point and hope for the best? The Cathar twitched an almost imperceptible movement. Instructions are contained within the device's data core. However, your cognitive profile suggests a high probability of misinterpretation. Surrender it immediately. Lucky scoffed. My cognitive profile? Last time I checked, I aced all my psych tests. Besides, aren't you supposed to, serve and protect or something? How about a little faith in humanity, huh? She paused, a mischievous glint in her eyes, or whatever I am. She fiddled with a button on the device. A soft whirring sound filled the air, and the glyphs on its surface began to glow brighter. Oops, she said, a little too casually. Did I break it? The Cathar officer's synthesized voice took on a note of urgency. Cease manipulation. You are activating the tertiary temporal displacement field. Immediate cessation is advised. Ignoring the Cathar's increasingly frantic warnings, Lucky continued to poke and prod at the device. It was just too tempting. Tertiary displacement field? Sounds like a fancy way of saying time warp. I always wanted to visit the Jurassic period. Suddenly, the device emitted a loud bang, and a beam of blue light shot out, striking a nearby pile of debris. The pile shimmered, then vanished, replaced by a potted plant. The Cathar stared at the plant, its mirrored visor reflecting the surreal scene. That is not within acceptable parameters. You have destabilized the temporal integrity of this sector. Your actions are problematic. Lucky shrugged, feigning innocence. Hey, at least it's green. Brightens up the place, don't you think? She glanced at the Cathar, a wide grin spreading across her face. So, about that coffee. Lucky ignored the Cathar's sputtering protests and began experimenting more earnestly with the alien contraption. She pressed a series of buttons, rotated a few dials, and generally treated the device like a particularly complex microwave oven. The glyphs pulsed with increasing intensity, and a low hum resonated from within its metallic shell. Come on, baby, she muttered. Work your magic. I'm dying for a decent cup. After several minutes of tinkering, a small drawer slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, nestled amongst intricate circuitry, was a small mesh filter. A filter that looked suspiciously like the kind you'd find in, a coffee maker. No. Freakin' way, she breathed. This whole time, she rummaged through her scavenged supplies, pulling out a small baggie filled with the dark roasted beans she'd managed to salvage from her ship's wreckage. All right, you overgrown toaster, she said, addressing the device. Let's see what you can really do. She carefully measured out a scoop of the precious grounds and deposited it into the filter. The Cathar, who had been observing Lucky's actions, with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination, finally found its voice. Your unauthorized modification of temporal apparatus is a violation of Galactic Treaty 47B, subsection Epsilon. You are ordered to cease this desecration. Lucky merely rolled her eyes, ignoring the alien's frantic pronouncements. She located a small reservoir within the device and filled it with the purified water she'd been rationing. Desecration? Please. I'm about to elevate this hunk of junk to its true potential. She pressed a large central button, and the device whirred to life with a renewed intensity. A moment later, a rich, aromatic scent filled the air. It was the unmistakable aroma of freshly brewed coffee, so potent and intoxicating that it momentarily eclipsed the metallic tang of the alien wreckage. Lucky inhaled deeply, her eyes widening in delight. Oh, sweet caffeine gods, she murmured. It's beautiful. The Cathar, however, seemed less than impressed. That pungent effluvium. What is the purpose of this olfactory assault? It recoiled slightly, its mirrored visor fogging slightly. Explain yourself, human. What unholy concoction have you wrought? Lucky poured herself a steaming mug of the dark liquid, the aroma promising a jolt that would make the stars themselves seem brighter. She took a tentative sip, closed her eyes, and sighed contentedly. "This," she declared, holding up the mug, "is coffee, the elixir of life, the nectar of the gods, and you, my rigid little friend, are about to experience enlightenment." She offered the mug to the Cathar, who recoiled as if presented with a vial of acid. Enlightenment from brown water? I find that highly improbable. Our society achieves enlightenment through rigorous adherence to protocol and the precise execution of predetermined directives. Lucky chuckled. Yeah, well, that sounds about as fun as a solar flare in a tin can. Trust me, this is a much faster route. She nudged the mug closer. Just a little sip. What's the worst that could happen? Driven by a mixture of curiosity and a deep-seated desire to understand the human's illogical behavior, the Cathar hesitantly extended one of its manipulator claws and took a minuscule sip. Its visor fogged completely, and a series of rapid clicks and whirs emanated from its vocalizer. The effect was subtle at first, a slight twitch in its manipulator claws, but then a wave of energy washed over it, banishing the rigid control that had defined its existence. "Ideas," it exclaimed, its voice cracking with uncharacteristic excitement. "So many ideas. We could rearrange the entire quadrant. We could invent new forms of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy 2.0. Chaos had officially arrived on the desolate scrap heap, and it spread like cosmic wildfire. Cathar after Cathar succumbed to the siren song of caffeine, their rigid adherence to protocol dissolving with each sip. The wreckage, once a scene of orderly salvage, transformed into a bizarre playground of manic activity. Cathar were dismantling equipment, rearranging debris, and engaging in spontaneous bursts of synchronized clicking and whirring, a caffeine-fueled ballet of bureaucratic breakdown. Lucky watched the spectacle with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "Well," she muttered to herself, "I guess that's one way to jumpstart a revolution." Who knew all it took was a decent cup of joe? She leaned against a piece of salvaged hull plating, a front-row seat to the unfolding pandemonium. This was better than anything she'd seen on intergalactic cable. The caffeinated Cathar, their minds buzzing with newfound energy and rebellious fervor, began to question the very foundations of their society. "Why must we adhere to these ancient directives?" one exclaimed, its voice echoing across the wreckage. "Why must we spend our existence meticulously cataloging space dust when we could be dancing, singing, inventing new forms of staplers?" The questions resonated with the other Cathar, their minds now open to possibilities they had never dared to consider. The rigid hierarchy that had governed their lives for centuries began to crumble under the weight of caffeine-induced enlightenment. They started to challenge their superiors, questioning the validity of long-standing protocols and demanding, well, they weren't exactly sure what they were demanding, but it involved less paperwork and more spontaneous expression. The Cathar elders, confined to their climate-controlled command module, watched in horror as their society descended into anarchy. "This is madness," one of them shrieked, its voice crackling with static. "The human has poisoned our minds with her brown water. We must restore order. We must initiate Emergency Protocol Omega-9. But Emergency Protocol Omega-9, which involved the deployment of mind-numbing bureaucratic procedures, proved utterly ineffective against the caffeinated horde. The rebels, fueled by coffee and a newfound sense of liberation, simply ignored the directives, dismissing them as outdated and boring. They were too busy dismantling the command module and turning it into a giant mobile coffee bar. Seeing their authority crumbling, the elders issued a desperate plea to the remaining uncaffeinated Cathar. "We must stop them. We must confiscate the coffee-making device. We must save our society from this delicious, energizing doom." But the uncaffeinated Cathar were few and far between. Most had already succumbed to the allure of the dark brew, their minds hopelessly altered by its potent effects. And those who remained were too terrified to confront the caffeine-fueled rebels, who were now armed with staplers, spreadsheets, and a burning desire for, well, more coffee mostly. Amidst the chaos, Lucky found herself being hailed as a sort of revolutionary figure. The Cathar, in their caffeine-addled state, seemed to believe she had intentionally orchestrated this uprising. They flocked to her, showering her with mangled pieces of salvaged equipment and incoherent expressions of gratitude. "Human," one of them chirped, thrusting a bent antenna into her hands. "You have shown us the way. You have freed us from the shackles of bureaucracy. We are forever in your debt." Lucky, bewildered but strangely flattered, accepted the antenna with a shrug. You're welcome. I just made some coffee. Didn't realize it was going to turn your whole world upside down." But the Cathar were beyond reason. They hoisted Lucky onto their shoulders, parading her around the wreckage like a conquering hero. They chanted her name, or at least what they thought was her name, a series of clicks and whirs that vaguely resembled the sound of a coffee grinder. "I guess," Lucky thought, as she was carried aloft by a horde of caffeinated Cathar, "this is what it feels like to accidentally lead a revolution. Remind me to add intergalactic Liberator to my resume." The situation was spiraling further and further out of control, but hey, at least things were interesting. And who knew, maybe this bizarre caffeine-fueled rebellion would actually lead to something good, or at the very least a more interesting form of bureaucracy. But then, something unexpected happened. A small delegation of Cathar elders, looking weary and strangely hopeful, approached Lucky. They were carrying a device that resembled a highly polished, platinum-plated suggestion box. "Human," the lead elder clicked, its voice surprisingly steady. "We have convened and analyzed the data, and by data, we mean we drank a lot of that coffee." It shuddered slightly, then continued. "We believe we now understand the true nature of your weapon." Lucky raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, really? And what's that?" The elder paused, then spoke with a newfound sense of clarity. "It is a catalyst for change, a tool for unlocking potential, a delicious, invigorating experience." The other elders nodded in agreement, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with caffeine-induced enlightenment. "So," Lucky said, leaning back against a salvaged heat shield, "you're not going to try and, I don't know, vaporize me with some bureaucratic superweapon?" "Vaporize? Preposterous," another elder exclaimed. "We are Cathar, not barbarians. We are reevaluating our strategic directives." The lead elder stepped forward. "We have decided to integrate the coffee break into our daily schedule. 15 minutes of caffeinated contemplation every 4 cycles. Mandatory for all personnel." Lucky blinked. "You're serious?" "Absolutely. Preliminary data suggests a 300% increase in innovative problem-solving, a 500% reduction in tedious paperwork, and a startling rise in spontaneous acts of friendship." The elder paused, a flicker of something almost resembling a smile crossing its face. "Also, morale is through the roof." And so, the Cathar society began to change. The rigid protocols didn't disappear entirely, of course, but now, interspersed between the meticulously catalogued space dust and the precisely worded bureaucratic directives were moments of caffeinated chaos. Cathar could be seen sketching wild inventions on recycled spreadsheets, engaging in philosophical debates about the meaning of staplers, and even occasionally dancing. The transformation was remarkable. The Cathar, once known for their unyielding adherence to tradition, were now experimenting, innovating, and even having fun. Their society was still structured, still procedural, but it was now infused with a spark of creativity, a willingness to question, and a newfound appreciation for the simple pleasures of life, like a really good cup of coffee. The cow elders, initially horrified by the caffeine-fueled rebellion, now presided over these coffee breaks with a sense of bewildered pride. They still meticulously documented every aspect of the process: the optimal brewing temperature, the precise ratio of coffee to water, the psychological effects of caffeine on bureaucratic efficiency. But they did so with a newfound sense of enthusiasm. Lucky, watching the reformed Cathar society, couldn't help but smile. Well, she thought, I guess sometimes all it takes to change the world is a little bit of caffeine, and maybe a complete disregard for galactic protocol. The Cathar were still the Cathar, but they were now caffeinated Cathar. And the galaxy, for better or worse, would never be the same. Their ships were still meticulously organized, their paperwork still flawlessly processed, but now they did it all with a slight jitter, a twitch in their multifaceted eyes, and a burning desire for their next coffee break. With a wave to the nearest, slightly twitchy Cathar officer, Lucky climbed aboard her jury-rigged escape pod, now equipped with a platinum-plated coffee maker, courtesy of the grateful Cathar. As the pod detached from the Cathar vessel and drifted back into the inky blackness, she couldn't help but grin. The Cathar homeworld receded into the distance, leaving behind a civilization forever altered by the introduction of caffeine. Lucky glanced at the navigation console, a faint coded message blinking in the corner. It was a single line of text, almost subliminal. Mission accomplished. She chuckled. Mission accomplished, huh? I just made a bunch of space bureaucrats, addicted to coffee. That's my legacy. But there was a glint in her eye, a hint of something more beneath the sarcasm. As she set a course for the nearest galactic waypoint, a thought occurred to her. This wasn't the first time she'd stumbled upon a technologically advanced, yet strangely humorless alien species, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Maybe she wasn't just a random human who'd woken up in the stars. Maybe she was something else entirely. A cosmic barista, perhaps? A galactic spice merchant, tasked with introducing a little bit of chaos and a whole lot of caffeine to the far corners of the universe. She sipped from a newly brewed cup of Cathar blend coffee, the potent liquid sending a pleasant jolt through her system. Well, she murmured to herself, time to find out what other bland, protocol-obsessed civilizations are out there, just begging for a wake-up call. The escape pod, powered by scavenged technology and a whole lot of ingenuity, accelerated into the void. Earth was a distant memory, a forgotten home. Her new home was the stars, and her mission was clear: to boldly go where no caffeine has gone before. As Lucky journeyed deeper into the cosmos, the Cathar society continued to evolve. Coffee breaks became an integral part of their culture, leading to innovations in science, art, and even diplomacy. They developed new brewing techniques, cultivated rare coffee beans on hydroponic space farms, and even invented a caffeinated energy drink that quickly became the galaxy's hottest commodity. The once rigid Cathar became known throughout the galaxy as the caffeinated connoisseurs, a race of brilliant, innovative, and slightly jittery beings who had transformed their entire civilization thanks to a chance encounter with a human and a very powerful coffee maker. And somewhere out among the stars, Lucky smiled, knowing she'd played her part in spicing up the galaxy, one cup of coffee at a time. Her legacy, it seemed, was just beginning.